The night my father and the priest stood over me in God's house, shouting prayers that sounded more like punishment. I thought my life was over. But I was wrong. That was the night a miracle I can never explain happened right before my eyes. The church was dark that evening. The candles had burned low, and the air smelled like old wood and smoke. I knelt in front of the altar, shaking. My father stood behind me, and beside him was Father Andrew, the man everyone in town called holy. They both looked down at me, and I could feel my heart beating so fast I thought I would faint. Tears rolled down my face, but neither of them cared. "Confess your sin," my father shouted, his voice echoing through the empty church. "I didn't do anything, Papa," I cried. "Please, I didn't do anything." Father Andrew raised the Bible high, his eyes cold. "You brought shame to your family, child. You must be cleansed." And before I could even speak again, he struck me across the face with the book. I fell to the ground, trembling. My father pulled me up roughly and forced me to kneel again. "God will not forgive lies," Father Andrew said, his voice deep and frightening. That was the moment I stopped believing that church was a safe place. That was the night they took turns punishing me, in God's house. And yet, none of them knew that same night, something was about to happen that would change everything forever. The wind howled outside. The doors shook. And then, a blinding light filled the church. Everything stopped. When I was a little girl, I believed the church was the safest place in the world. I used to run through the narrow path beside the river every Sunday morning, my shoes in my hands, laughing as the church bells rang. My father, Thomas, was a strict man. He worked as a carpenter, and everyone in the village respected him. People said, "Mr. Thomas is a man of God. His daughter is lucky to have him." But they didn't know what life was like inside our small house at the edge of the town. My mother had died when I was 7. After her death, Father changed. He became angry and quiet. Sometimes he sat by the window for hours, staring into the dark. Sometimes he shouted at me for things I didn't even do. Father Andrew, the priest, started visiting our house often. He told me that my father needed help, that God was testing us. He always wore a smile, but his eyes never smiled. They were hard and sharp, like glass. One day, Father Andrew said he wanted to teach me the ways of obedience. I didn't understand what he meant then. But I was a child, and I believed every word that came from the mouth of a priest. So I listened. He made me kneel for long hours, praying until my knees hurt. If I closed my eyes from tiredness, he would pour cold water on me and say, "The devil makes you sleepy." When I told my father I didn't want to go to the church anymore, he slapped me across the face. "You will obey Father Andrew," he said. "He is the voice of God." I started to hate the sound of the church bell. Every time it rang, I felt my stomach twist. But I kept going. I didn't want to make my father angry again. The people in the town thought we were the perfect family. They saw us walking together to church. My father, proud and tall, and me, quiet and obedient. No one saw the fear in my eyes. Days turned into weeks, and the punishments grew worse. Sometimes, Father Andrew would make me clean the church floor alone at night. He said God could see my heart better in silence. The church was cold and dark. Every sound made me jump. One evening, while I scrubbed the floor, I heard whispering near the altar. I looked up, but no one was there. I thought it was my mind playing tricks. But the whisper came again, clear, soft, and close. "Do not be afraid." I froze. The voice wasn't like Father Andrew's or my father's. It was gentle, almost like my mother's. Then a candle flickered by itself. I dropped the cloth and ran out of the church, heart pounding. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought maybe it was an angel, or maybe I was losing my mind. The next day, I told Father Andrew about the voice. He frowned and said, "You are imagining things. The devil likes to deceive foolish girls." Then he made me kneel again and pray for forgiveness for hearing false spirits. But deep down, I knew what I heard was real. Something was happening. Something greater than them both. One Sunday evening, my father told me to meet him and Father Andrew in the church after the service. I didn't want to go, but I had no choice. The church was empty. Only the sound of the rain hitting the roof filled the air. I stood at the front, my hands shaking. Father Andrew said, "You must confess again." I have nothing to confess, I whispered. He gave my father a look, and my father nodded. The punishment began. They shouted, prayed loudly, accused me of having a dark spirit. I cried and begged, but they didn't stop. The world around me started to spin. And then, the lights in the church began to flicker again, just like that night. The air turned cold, and the ground shook slightly. Father Andrew stopped mid-sentence. My father looked around, scared. Then a voice came, the same gentle voice I heard before. Enough. A gust of wind blew through the church, knocking down the candles. The whole place went dark. Father Andrew screamed. My father fell to his knees. And I stood there frozen, staring at the altar as a bright light began to form above it. It looked like someone, or something, was standing there. The same voice spoke again, louder this time. You will not harm her again. The light grew brighter and brighter, until everything disappears. When I opened my eyes, the church was silent. My father was on the floor, shaking. Father Andrew was gone. And I could feel something different inside me. Peace. But that peace did not last long. Because what happened after that night, what they did next, was even worse than what I could have imagined. When the light faded, everything was still. The church smelled of smoke and candle wax. My father knelt on the cold floor, holding his head. Father Andrew was nowhere to be found. Just the echo of his name bouncing around the empty walls. I was scared, but I also felt a strange calmness, as if invisible hands were holding me steady. I looked at the altar. One candle, the tallest one, had stayed lit. Its flame didn't move, even though the wind had just swept through the whole church. My father lifted his eyes slowly. For the first time, I saw fear in them. Not anger, not pride, but real fear. He whispered, "Did you see that?" I didn't answer. I just stood there, watching the single candle burn brighter and brighter, until my father turned away and covered his face. We left the church without speaking. Rain washed over us the whole walk home. He never said a word, and I didn't dare ask where Father Andrew had gone. That night I lay awake, listening to the storm. My father's footsteps paced the floor again and again. Then the sound stopped, and I heard him crying, quietly, like someone who didn't want God to hear his shame. The next morning, the whole town was whispering. Some said lightning had struck the church. Others said they saw a white figure standing by the altar. But no one knew the truth except me. When I went to fetch water, Mrs. Clara, our neighbor, asked, "Child, where is Father Andrew? He didn't show up for morning mass." I looked down at the ground and said softly, "Maybe he went to see God." Mrs. Clara blinked, confused, but I kept walking. Days passed. The priest never returned. My father stopped going to church and stopped talking to people. He stayed inside, reading his Bible over and over, muttering things I couldn't understand. One evening, he called me to the table. "Sit," he said. His voice was tired. When I sat down, he stared at me for a long time before speaking again. "I thought I was saving you," he said. "I thought I was doing what God wanted." He looked at his hands, shaking. But that light, maybe it was God telling me to stop. I wanted to forgive him right there, but I couldn't. My heart was too heavy. Instead, I said, "God doesn't hurt his children to save them." He looked at me like I had spoken a truth he had forgotten long ago. After that night, my father changed. He stopped shouting, stopped making me kneel for hours. He even smiled sometimes. But the peace didn't stay long. One afternoon, a group of men came to our house. They were from the church. The oldest one, Deacon Samuel, said, "We found Father Andrew's robe near the river. People are saying strange things happened that night. Thomas, we need to talk." My father's face turned pale. He asked them to leave, but they didn't. "We heard you were both in the church," Deacon Samuel said. "Tell us what you saw." I wanted to speak, to tell them everything, but my father's eyes warned me to stay quiet. He said only, "There was lightning. It frightened us. That's all." The men left, but I knew the story wasn't over. That night I dreamed again. I saw the same light, brighter than before. This time it spoke clearly. "Child, truth will set you free." When I woke up, I ran to tell my father, but he wasn't there. His bed was empty. The door was open. I ran outside, calling his name, but the only answer was the wind moving through the trees. The villagers gathered later that day, searching near the church and the river, but there was no sign of him. Some said he ran away because of guilt. Some said the light had taken him too. I didn't know what to believe. All I knew was that I was alone. Days turned into weeks. I started living with Mrs. Clara. She was kind and gave me food, but people in town began to treat me differently. They whispered when I walked by. Children pointed at me and said, "That's the girl from the cursed church." At night, I prayed and asked God why this happened to me. I told him I didn't understand miracles that took people away. Then one night, I heard the voice again, gentle like before. "Do not be afraid. Your pain will become your strength." I sat up in bed, heart pounding. Strength for what? I whispered. The voice didn't answer, but the candle beside my bed flickered once, like a nod. I didn't know it yet, but that was the beginning of a new battle. Because a week later, the church elders came knocking again, holding something that made my blood run cold. It was my father's Bible, burned on the edges, with a page missing. The sky was gray that morning when the elders came to our door. Mrs. Clara called me from the kitchen, her voice trembling. "Child, come. They're here for you." I stepped out slowly and saw 3 men standing by the doorway. They looked uneasy, their hats in their hands, rainwater dripping from their coats. Deacon Samuel, the oldest one, spoke first. "We found this near the edge of the forest," he said, holding out a book. It was my father's Bible. The leather cover was burned and torn, and the smell of smoke still clung to it. A part of the middle pages had been ripped out, and the rest were black around the edges. My hands shook as I took it. "Where did you find it?" I asked. "By the big oak tree, near the old well," he replied quietly. There were footprints too, but the trail ended suddenly, as if the person just vanished. Mrs. Clara crossed herself and whispered, "Lord have mercy." The men asked if I knew anything, but I didn't. I just clutched the Bible to my chest, my heart pounding. After they left, Mrs. Clara looked at me. "You should burn that book, child. Bad things follow it." I shook my head. "No, ma'am. My father's name is still in here. I'll keep it." That night, when everyone had gone to bed, I opened the Bible by candlelight. The missing page was from the book of Psalms, Psalm 91, the one that says, "He will command his angels to guard you in all your ways." My father had always read that psalm before sleeping. I traced the burnt edge with my finger and whispered, "Where are you, Papa?" Suddenly, a drop of wax from the candle fell on the page, and I saw something strange beneath it. Letters that weren't part of the printed text. They looked like they'd been written with a shaky hand, maybe in charcoal. I rubbed the wax away carefully. The words read, "Forgive me. The truth is in the well." My heart almost stopped. The well. I grabbed my shawl and ran out into the night. The moon was full, lighting the path through the woods. The wind whispered through the trees, and every sound made me jump. When I reached the old well, I stopped. It was covered with thick vines, and the stones were damp and cold. I knelt beside it and looked down. Only darkness stared back. "Papa," I whispered. My voice echoed down the hollow. No answer. I was about to turn away when I heard something, soft at first, then clearer. It sounded like water splashing. And then a voice. "Child." I froze. It was the same gentle voice I had heard in the church that night. "Do not fear the truth," it said. "But be ready. It will hurt before it heals." The wind rose suddenly, pushing me back. The vines around the well shook violently, and a small burst of light came from deep inside. I stumbled, fell to the ground, and when I looked again, the well was still. Silent. I ran home shaking. The next morning, I went back with Mrs. Clara. She brought a lantern and a long rope. We lowered the lantern slowly into the well. It swung back and forth, lighting up the damp stones inside. Then we saw it, something shiny at the bottom. It wasn't a body, but a small metal cross. My father's cross. The one he always wore around his neck. Mrs. Clara gasped. "He's gone, child. The river below must have taken him." But I didn't believe it. My heart told me he wasn't dead. That night, as I sat by the window, I thought I saw a figure standing outside by the fence. It looked like a man, tall, wearing a long coat, had bowed. I ran outside calling, "Papa!" But when I reached the fence, there was no one there. Only the smell of wet earth and the faint sound of a hymn. One my father used to hum when he worked in the shed. I felt goosebumps all over my skin. The next day, something even stranger happened. Father Andrew came back. He appeared in the middle of town during the morning market, walking slowly, clothes torn, face pale as ash. People gasped and stepped back as if they'd seen a ghost. I was there, buying bread for Mrs. Clara. When I saw him, my basket fell from my hands. He looked around like a man who'd woken from a long nightmare. His eyes met mine and he whispered, "The light. The light told me to confess." The crowd gathered around him, asking questions, but he ignored them. He pointed at me. "She knows," he said. "The child knows what happened." The elders tried to calm him down, but he fell to his knees right there in the street, crying. "I saw the truth," he said. "I saw what I did. God showed me." Everyone was silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Then he looked straight at me again and whispered, "Forgive me, and forgive your father too." Before anyone could speak, he collapsed. People screamed. Some ran for the doctor. But I just stood there frozen, staring at the man who had once called himself holy, now lying lifeless in the dust. The crowd parted as Deacon Samuel lifted Father Andrew's hand. There, in his palm, was something small and blackened, another burned piece of a Bible page. When he opened it, the same verse was visible. Psalm 91. The one my father had lost. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window again, clutching my father's Bible and staring at the stars. The voice came once more, calm and kind. "You have seen darkness, child. But you must tell the truth now. The world needs to hear." I whispered, "What truth?" The candle beside me flickered, and I saw a shadow move across the room. It looked like a hand, my father's hand, pointing toward the church. And just like that, I knew what I had to do. Tomorrow, I would go back to the church. I would stand where it all began. And I would speak the truth that everyone feared to hear. The morning I walked back to the church, mist covered the whole village. Every step on the gravel path echoed like a drumbeat in my chest. I carried my father's burned Bible close to my heart. The church door groaned as I pushed it open. Inside, everything was exactly as it had been that terrible night. The same wooden pews, the same cracked floor, the same faint smell of candle smoke. But this time the air felt softer, almost as if someone had been waiting for me. I stood before the altar and whispered, "I'm not afraid anymore." The last candle on the table flickered to life on its own. Its light fell across the stone floor, revealing faint markings, circles drawn in ash, small symbols I had never seen before. I knelt to touch them, and the ground trembled gently under my fingers. Then I heard footsteps behind me. It was Deacon Samuel. He stopped near the door, breathing heavily. "Child," he said, "the townspeople are frightened. They say the church is cursed." I looked at him. "It isn't cursed," I said quietly. "It's just full of secrets." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I opened the Bible and showed him the burned page. My father wrote that the truth is in the well. But I think the truth is also here, in what this place hides. Deacon Samuel's eyes widened. "Your father." He tried to stop Father Andrew's punishments. That night he begged us to close the church for a time, but no one listened. We all thought he had lost his faith. My throat tightened. He wasn't faithless. He was frightened. Samuel nodded slowly. After the light appeared, Father Andrew came to me. He said the light showed him every cruel thing he had done in the name of holiness. He was terrified of himself. A deep silence filled the room. The candle burned brighter, and for a moment I saw something shimmering above the altar, like a figure made of light. Not sharp or scary but gentle. Calm. A voice filled the church. Not loud yet strong enough to shake my heart. "The truth frees only the brave." Samuel dropped to his knees, trembling. "Lord, forgive us." I could hardly breathe. "Who are you?" I whispered. The light pulsed once, and I felt warmth spread through me. Not burning but healing, as if someone had placed a hand on my shoulder. Then the voice said, "Your father's prayer was answered. He is safe. Tell them what you saw, and the fear will end." The figure faded. The candle went out. The church was still. I turned to Deacon Samuel, tears rolling down my cheeks. I have to speak to the people. That afternoon the whole village gathered outside the church. They wanted to know what had happened to Father Andrew, to my father, to me. I stood on the church steps, knees shaking. But when I began to speak, my voice felt steady. God's house is not a place of fear, I said. It's a place of mercy. My father and Father Andrew both forgot that. They used punishment when God wanted kindness. The light came to remind them, and us, that faith without love turns to darkness. People murmured, some crying, some bowing their heads. I told them about the well, the burned Bible, and the voice that had saved me. I told them I didn't see a curse that night, but forgiveness. When I finished, the clouds above the church parted, and sunlight poured through the broken roof, filling the inside with gold. Mrs. Clara whispered, "Look, a miracle." Everyone stood in silence. For the first time, there was peace. But as the crowd began to leave, a cold breeze blew through the doorway, carrying the faint sound of my father's voice. "Child, the work isn't finished yet." My heart jumped. I looked around, but there was no one. Only the burned Bible in my hands, warm now as if someone had just held it. I knew then that the miracle wasn't over. It had only begun. For many days after the sunlight filled the church, the village was quiet. People stopped arguing about curses or ghosts. They repaired the broken roof and planted flowers along the path. Everyone said the darkness had finally left. But I knew something was unfinished. Each night I heard a faint whisper outside my window. A man's voice humming the same hymn my father used to sing while carving wood. I felt that he was trying to tell me something he hadn't said before the light took him away. One evening, I went back to the old well alone. The moon hung low and round above the trees, turning the water silver. I knelt beside it and whispered, "Papa, if you're still here, I'm ready to listen." At first, there was only the sound of crickets. Then the water began to glow softly, and I saw a reflection that wasn't mine. My father's face appeared, gentle, younger than I remembered. His eyes looked clear, free from the anger that had once filled them. "My little one," he said, his voice echoing like wind through the trees. "I hurt you when I thought I was helping. I let fear speak louder than love. But the light showed me the truth, that God never asked me to be cruel." Tears filled my eyes. "Papa, are you gone forever?" He smiled sadly. "No one who loves truly ever disappears. I'm where peace lives. But you must finish what I could not." "What is that?" I asked. "Teach them," he said. "Tell them that faith without kindness turns hearts to stone. Remind them that God's house is for healing, not pain." The water rippled, and his face faded into the moonlight. I whispered goodbye, but inside, I felt his warmth stay with me. When I returned to the village, I spoke to Deacon Samuel and Mrs. Clara. We decided to rebuild the church. Not just its walls, but its meaning. We painted the inside white, planted new candles, and opened the doors to everyone, even those who had been cast out before. People who had once been afraid to step near came and prayed again. Children laughed in the yard. The same place that had once been full of fear became a place of music and peace. Years passed. I grew up, married, and had children of my own. Sometimes I told them this story. The story of how God's light saved me, not by destroying the people who hurt me, but by changing their hearts and mine. I told them, when people act in God's name but forget love, darkness follows. But when we forgive, even broken places can shine again. On quiet nights, I still sit by my window. When the wind moves through the trees, I can hear that same hymn floating through the air. And I smile, because I know my father is still near, proud of what became of his little girl. That's the miracle that happened in God's house. Not lightning, not thunder, but the rebirth of a heart that learned to forgive. If you believe that light still finds us, even in our darkest places, then don't just watch. Join the family. Follow for more true miracle stories that touch the heart and heal the soul.